Welcome to Before First Gear, a series where I sit down with top racers to learn how they got started, honed their skills, and some of the unique challenges they faced along the way. Every racer has a story, and I look forward to hearing it. I'm joined today by Corey Lewis. Corey's a Daytona 24-hour winner. Pretty cool. A very accomplished sports car driver, has a couple championships with Lamborghini Super Trofeo series, started out in karting, got in through the Skip Barber series, then really dove into sports cars, and really has followed this progression in the U.S. ladder, going pretty much to the top as we look at IMSA. And now we've got the Daytona 24 is just a few weeks away. So are you driving in that this year, Corey?
Thankfully, yes, I am. I'll be driving for Proton competition in the new Ford Mustang GT3 car that's coming out. So it's
Oh,
exciting
that's
times
cool.
ahead.
That's like brand new this year, right?
Brand new, yeah. GT3
Wow. Have you done some testing in it now?
car. No,
Okay.
no, I haven't. All my news came together literally 4 or 5 days ago. So I'm a little bit late to the party. So my first taste of it will be next week at the Roar, the testing before the main 24-hour race. So we'll have 2 or 3 days there basically to kind of get our grips on things and prepare for the 24-hour after that.
Have you found, before we kind of go back 15, 20 years when you started, have you found that a lot of your seats have come to fruition sort of within days for some of these really unique experiences that you get?
Honestly, yeah. Um, this one for sure. Like normally you go through the Christmas, New Year holiday knowing what you're doing. This one was not the case. I remember literally just like 6 days ago.
All right, so let's jump back. You're from Pennsylvania, right?
Pennsylvania, Northeast
Okay.
Pennsylvania, Nazareth, Pennsylvania, Lehigh Valley. For those race enthusiasts, the Andretti family is notorious for Nazareth, Pennsylvania. That's where they're from. That's where Mario, Michael, Marco have lived over the course of the years. Mario's still basically my neighbor. Marco's my neighbor. I'm about 3 minutes from their house. So the racing heritage has always been strong here. And I guess getting really how it all really started. My brother went to school with Marco, elementary school way back when. And my dad was a big football, baseball, basketball coach for my brother and I and our friends growing up. My dad coached Marco. With that, my brother used to hang out with Marco all the time. I grew up on a alpaca farm. Not many people know what those are. They're basically llamas. The cousin of a llama, a little bit smaller. So we always had land, and then growing up, we had dirt bikes and quads and whatnot that we would ride around on just for fun. But then once my brother started hanging out with Marco a little bit more, Marco was then just starting in go karts, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Immediately caught the somewhat of the racing bug or just interest rather, and Marco and his dad, Michael, Mario, they all kind of guided me on how to begin.
So
So
you would say your dad and kind of your family, not really a big racing family, not a lot of interest in it. This really stemmed from, you personally and your brother and an
yeah,
organic desire to do this.
yeah, 100%. I'm the only one in the family that races. um,
So what role, the Andretti's, this is the biggest name in US motorsports probably. I'd imagine it sounds like they played a role in your career.
yeah, early on for sure. I don't like to name drop at all. Like this is the actual story. Without their guidance early on, I basically followed Marco's footsteps early on. Drove for the same go-kart teams. We drove the same chassis for most of the time growing up. I kind of try to follow his path throughout karting, Skip Barber, you know, open wheel ranks, and then try to, obviously my main goal was IndyCar to try to follow Marco through.
What age would you say when you first jumped in a go-kart?
I was about 6, 7 years old when I first started in go-karts. I remember we started out in a parking lot.
Who is we at this point? Is this like you and your dad, or are we with Marco? Or
At this point, it's mainly my dad, myself, Marco, Michael. So it's basically the four of us, kind of just figuring out one if I liked it or not. I remember when Marco first had his first race in Flemington, New Jersey. We all went just to go watch and support, and I believe Marco won that race, and he's in victory lane. And I remember they're like, "Oh, go sit in his go kart," and I'm like, over the moon, so happy, and I did it. And I'm like, I think my parents saw the glimmer in the eye of like, okay, he's hooked now, and we're in trouble. And then Michael and Mario and Marco, collectively the three of them kind of help guide and get a chassis.
At what point was your next step that you actually went into your first go-karting race? And then from there, when did you actually do 5, 6, 7 years probably of competitive karting?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in go-karts, so 5 or 6 years or so. We went to a local, or closest local track was in upstate New York, Oakland Valley Race Park. It's still there today. And then from there, it was just more so getting used to being around other go-karts, learning new tracks, understanding the braking techniques, and just getting around the track. I'll never forget the first actual race that I did was in the wet, and I think I want to say I started like fourth or fifth, and for somehow I got to first within the first two corners, and then like four corners later I spun, cart died, and I thought my career was over. So it was like as the highest of highs and the lowest of lows within a 30-second period. I thought, if Michael, Mario, Marco are there, obviously I got to show out well and do well. And I was like, all right, I'm in the lead, and then all of a sudden I spin, and it was over. I thought my career was over well before just after it started, really. So
Were you kind of consistently starting to win races, kind of local races there? And then did you get into a national championship? What was kind of step between Skip Barber and karting?
yeah, so locally we were doing pretty well. We were winning, the local championships. We were winning week in, week out. Like, it was just a consistent basis of podiums and gathering some good hardware. And we knew that the next phase, if I wanted to pursue this as a career, we had to go nationals. So we raced all around the country against the best of the best. And this is where racing was becoming increasingly difficult because, like any form of motorsport, there's the big budget teams that have the best engines, the carts, the unlimited amounts of tires and fuel, the whole nine. My entire family were middle class, working our tails off to make ends meet, and here we are up against some of these heavy hitter teams, and we're still holding our own. So national karting, we did well. We never won any championships, by that means. It's just I remember the one year I missed it by like 1 or 2 points. We made it work, and we got by with really good results in karting, but no overall championships. That's when we knew it was like, okay, after so many years of go-karts, you got to transition. Otherwise, you're stuck in go-karts for your career, and I didn't want that. And um, once again, we followed Marco's footsteps after national go-karts to Skip Barber Racing School, and I did my first 3-day event at Lime Rock.
At what age were you then when you decided to go to Skip Barber and then entered that series?
13, 14 years old, I want to
Wow.
say.
Do you have any recollection of what it was like the first time you got into an actual race car from a go kart? Was it a big jump for you? Did it feel similar?
It wasn't as big of a jump as I thought it would be. The biggest thing for me was shifting, and then trying to understand what heel towing was to rev match, and that was the hardest thing for me is transitioning from carts to cars.
You joined Skip Barber, you ran in their national series.
Yeah, so throughout my Skip Barber journey, you started regionals. So I basically raced mainly Lime Rock, New Jersey Motorsports Park, East Coast stuff, right? And we did really well there. We won the championship the first year. I believe it was 14 races. We won almost all of them at that point. Got the regional championship, and then the next step was nationals. And nationals is now, the best of the best from West Coast to East Coast to the central areas. It was just everybody comes to one, and now you're on the Grand Am weekends or the kart days and the Formula Atlantic cars. So it puts you on a pedestal of, okay, now we're at the main show. There's a lot more eyes. It could be team owners looking for their next up and coming driver. So the pressure was on. And at that point in time, it was tough because one, I couldn't afford to go nationally racing. So I couldn't do the full national series. I think I did maybe 1 or 2 races only. I believe it was Sebring and VIR. And then after that, I didn't have funding. It ran out. But it was the place to be. You had guys like Joseph Newgarden, Carnegie Felipe, Connor Daly, and many others. I mean, they're still racing today. And every now and then we see each other in the paddock on the weekends and we kind of laugh and like, hey, man, we're still here. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool to see. So
In 2009 or 8, whenever it was, to do a Skip Barber 3-day school was about $3,500. Today it's $7,500 to run a race weekend at Bertle Roos. And I did it this season with Bertle Roos a couple of years ago. I think I paid like 15 grand for the whole season. Skip
yeah,
Barber is like 70,000. So I guess it seems to me that it's like there's not really an affordable Formula Car series at this point, which sucks.
it's a
Um,
different time now. But
yeah,
if I had to restart now, I don't know if I could do it. It's just too expensive. Exactly to your point, you could do a Skip Barber race weekend, 3, 4 grand in 3 day or whatever it may be, a lapping day for next to nothing then. But now it's like you said, a season of that is,
yeah,
uh,
it's
you know,
it's 70,
75,
80. Yeah,
70, 75. It's like that at that point in time. I remember thinking about sports cars, and the magic number was 150,000 for a full season in, I believe it was like Pro Mazda at the time. But now, like you look at like the Road to Indy series and how much that costs, it's like you're spending hundreds and thousands of dollars to get there, you know?
if we go back to where we kind of just left off, we went on a little tangent. You're 15, 16 years old, whatever. You ran 2 national Skip Barber races. You've run out of money. Yet you're still sitting here with the Daytona on your wrist. So what was like the next step, right? What happened after that?
It was right around the recession and no money was there. I remember just trying to nickel and dime our way to the national races. And then that's when my parents and I really sat down before that national season. Like, hey, man, we can only do 1 or 2 races. Make the most of it, but don't crash. We can't afford to crash. Can't pay the bill. I'm like, okay, let's try it. And so throughout my whole early career, we couldn't afford crash damage. So everything that I did was like go 110%, but for the love of God, don't crash because we're done then. Whatever bill that is to fix it, that was your next race. So after those national series, there was a point in time where I had nothing. I couldn't race. I didn't know anything about coaching at the time. I didn't know what else to do. My parents just said, "Hey, listen, like we've gotten you as far as we could. We can't afford to go anything more. Um, we know you love racing, but I'm sorry." I had a coach at the time at Skip Barber that we became still even to this day, Grant Mayman. It was between himself and Scott Speed for the Red Bull F1 ride, and ultimately Scott Speed got the deal. And Grant and I, we always just stayed in touch. And he said, "Hey, listen, Skip Barber he had a really good run there. What if we just jumped straight to Pro Mazda or Star Mazda at the time?" And I was like, "Okay, cool. Like let's give it a go." So I skipped F2000s. I went straight and did a test at Monticello Motor Club with a member car that had a Pro Mazda. Um, and from there, Grant met me there, and we met with the team of mechanics that were running the car at the time at Monticello. And we did a 1 day test at the Monticello Motor Club and knocked it out of the park. And everyone's like, "Wow, like you know what you're doing. We just need to find you money." Like, yeah, well, it's kind of how it's been. But if we find money, amazing. If not, yeah, well, we'll just keep trying. And I remember the track director at the time was like, "Hey, have you ever done coaching before?" So then it opened a whole new avenue of, well, I've never coached before, but I feel like I'm pretty good with being verbal of what I want the car to do. And I felt like I could translate that to anybody that was driving. So after that, that's when I started instructing. I was at Monticello Motor Club for almost 8 years, 7, 8 years. and
Wow,
I believe that's
I
where
didn't
you and I
realize that.
met.
Yeah, yeah, we did, man. We did when I was at
Um,
Jaguar Land Rover.
yep.
Did How
And
old were you at that point then? Because did you between Skip Barber, your first pro Mazda test, and then going into coaching, did you go to school? Did you go to college after that? Did you pursue a certain route? Because there's probably a lot of downtime in between that.
there definitely was. Graduated high school. I remember that thinking like, oh, I'm still going to be a professional race car driver. And then I went to community college. At that point, I got my 2 year degree in business management.
This sounds like biggest inflection point in your career, right? Because you joined Monticello as a coach. You, you have your associates now, but now it's you got to find a whole bunch of money to actually go racing. So how do you do it? Because what was you managed to run in Formula Atlantic, was it?
So I did a lot of testing. So
Okay.
I'd never actually raced. I did Indy Lights testing. Anything I can get my hands on for free, I would. I would just drive them and try to impress the teams as, okay, maybe I could be their test driver or I could help with setups. I was starting to understand the dynamics of these bigger cars and understanding what they needed, what they didn't, what worked, what didn't. So basically, at this point, working at Monticello, sports cars was becoming a big thing, but I was still in my mind an open wheel guy. I was like, sports cars isn't for me. Maybe when I retire, from my IndyCar day, my IndyCar days, I can go back to sports cars and have another career there. So when I started coaching at Monticello, I was like, my dream is still open wheel, man. And I remember talking with Ari Strauss at the time. It was the main face of Monticello during those days, and he kept trying to push me. He's like, "Hey, you're doing really good here, coaching. You're fast. People like you. You're having fun. You're always here." It was to the point where like I just wouldn't go home. I'm like, "Give me as many days as possible. Like I love coaching. This is fun." And honestly, uh, without Ari's help early on and Monticello Motor Club, I wouldn't have had the sports car opportunity. Ari's the one that sat me down. I remember one day after work at the main clubhouse there, sat me down. He said, "Write down your goals. What do you want to do?" And I was like, I want to be a American factory driver for a manufacturer. I wanted to race overseas. I wanted to go win a pro race. I wanted to lead a lap. Just trying to make little accolades to find motivation. And he looked at it and goes, "Okay, cool." And then like a month later, he goes, "Hey, I have an opportunity for you. The Continental Tire Series in Grand Am." I remember it was the first year that Coda first opened up. He sponsored me and put me in one of the, I believe it was a Porsche Boxster at the time, in the ST class, and that was my first
And
ever sports car race.
that was a Monticello Motor Club car, probably, right?
It was
Because
Berg
I feel like
Racing. Yeah.
yeah, so I feel like in a way, Monticello has been an extraordinary feeder series for up and coming drivers, pairing them with gentleman drivers that can help fund that,
Yep.
and gentleman drivers are stoked to get that opportunity, and it's an awesome organization that he's built.
I mean, without Monticello, uh, I wouldn't have had the opportunities. I met so many people again there that have helped me throughout my career, whether it's just advice, whether it was sponsorships at the time, or just, hey, go talk to this guy. So it was a massive stepping stone in my career to elevate me to the next level. Like I
Yeah,
said, I was there for 8 years almost, and I was there almost every day.
and Monticello, I'd imagine, is where you also got hooked up with Lamborghini and Super
Yes,
Trofeo. Yeah.
Super Trofeo, yeah. So there was another member that Super Trofeo just started maybe a year. We were maybe the second year of Super Trofeo, and one of the members had 3 or 4 cars that they were racing in the series, and it was the Gallardos at the time. And he said, "Hey, you ever driven one of these things before?" And I said, "No, they look awesome though. Like they sound cool, they look cool." And he goes, "Well, why don't you come race for me on one of the weekends? See how you do. I have an extra car that needs to be ran. You've done really well here. Obviously, I've been watching you for a while, and let's give you a shot." And I remember, I think my first race might have been VIR at the time, and made the most of every opportunity. And we ended up winning the race. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. and it led me to more races that year. We finished second in the championship, even though we only completed less than half of the races. So we caught up to the main guys because we just kept fortunately winning. Um, and that's when Lamborghini started to take a liking of, oh,
Were you the only guy running at that time, or one of the few that wasn't a gentleman driver, we'll say, in that series that was like kind of aiming to go pro?
it was a pro kind of lineup. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, I was the AM at the time, but I
Yeah.
had a fast co-driver that obviously, by the end of the first weekend, we were identical in speed, and he still races today,
Okay.
professionally and coaches and whatnot. So everyone was like, "Wow, like you just hopped in this car, and you're as fast as the fastest guy here." That's where really the Lamborghini train kind of started.
I just want to take one step back before we get into Lambo. So you ran your first race at Coda, it sounds like, with the
Yep.
Continental Tire Series. And did you run several races in that series then and have some success there?
Yeah, so after that, we did really well. I think I qualified fourth my first ever time, and that right there was like, okay, there's a lot of momentum here. Ari took a big liking to it. He loved seeing the car up there, and and everything like that. And I
I
was
can
like,
imagine.
okay, he loved it, obviously, and obviously for me being in the driver's seat, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. 5 or 6 races, and we did extremely well. We ended up that year. I won my first professional race at Indianapolis. Um, I'll never forget. It was a last lap pass, and to win at Indy was mind blowing to me. I that was an amazing feat that I never even thought was even possible. But without their support at Monticello and the snowballing effect of after
I
that.
know, I know. It was on the road course at Indy, but did
Yep.
Michael or Marco reach out to you with a congrats?
Yeah, I mean they always say congrats.
Yeah,
It was more so of like, hey, good job, man. Like you're doing it. Obviously, it wasn't the open wheel path that you wanted, but they're always, I'll get whether it's a tweet or a text or something at that point in time, or when I go see Marco at the house, he's always, hey, dude, good job, or
yeah.
it was always they're always there, kind of watching from a distance.
I want to talk about then how you got into Trofeo, but more importantly, the path to actually, winning a GTD Rolex 24-hour race.
And then the 2015 season, again, I have to thank Monticello. It was a snowy day in upstate New York. It was snowing, it was raining, it was honestly quite miserable of a day. And I had a father and son come in. And for me, I didn't care who I worked with. I treat everybody the same. I don't really care who you are. It's like, hey, we're here to share the same passion of driving cars. Let me help you. And father and son had an amazing time having a ball. And the guy we're at lunch, he started asking me questions like, all right, so what do you race? What have you been up to? And I started showing him. At the time, I drove a lime green Super Trofeo car. And he's like, oh, show me a photo. So I showed him a photo, and he goes, oh, that's really cool. You know what would look really cool on that? I was like, you tell me. He goes, have a Monster Energy drink on the side of that car. A big logo on that car. It'd be really cool looking, huh? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, you go throughout the whole day, and he gives me his email, and it had a Coca-Cola email address to it. And then I look up his name, start looking it up, and here he's the CEO of Coca-Cola.
Wow.
And he mentioned, oh, we're going to buy out. I think at that point, Coca-Cola was buying out maybe 15-20% of Monster Energy drink at the time. And he's like, here's my email. Give me a call in 3 months. I won't forget you. Give me a call in 3 months. I was like, okay, whatever, dude. And then I realized who he was, and I'm like, oh my, man, okay. And then you start reading the headlines of Coca-Cola's buying into Monster and so on and so forth. I'm like, maybe this is legit. Okay. 3 months go by. I send him an email, and he's like, didn't forget about you. I'm going to put you in touch with the CEO of Monster, and we're going to put a deal together so you could run a full season in 2015 in Super Trofeo. And I'm like,
That is unbelievable.
oh my God.
Like,
I'm like, no way this is happening. Like, this is a dream. Lo and behold, I get an email from the CEO of Monster saying, hey, Corey, um, so and so's put us in touch. Told us we're going to put a deal together. Here's give me more information on your series. What are the costs, the whole nine, and if you had a team involved, let us know. So I said, okay, fine. And at this point, 2015 is when the new Super Trofeo came out. So the Gallardos were extinct at this point. But it was a new era of Super Trofeo cars, and I remember they're like, okay, if we do this monster, we need a matte black stealth Batmobile looking car with monster logo on it. And I was like, got it. So I made up a rendering, sent it to them. They said, okay, this is one of the most badass car we've ever seen. We're in. Here's the money. Good luck. And I was like, oh my God, it was that easy? Like, for whatever reason, I thought it was going to be this long drawn out process. Everybody that's ever worked with an energy drink company before was like, dude, you're going to be 4 or 5 months into this thing before you even get any sort of traction.
yeah.
I think to this day, unless there was another deal that happened, my deal was done in literally like 4 days. It was like the
Wow.
quickest transaction that has ever happened in the
We're,
history of Monster at that time.
I think it's in the history of like motorsport, period, maybe.
It, wild,
Yeah.
wild.
So, okay, two questions on that. When they first were like, all right, put the numbers together, I mean, at that point, you didn't really know the numbers for Lamborghini Super Trofeo, right?
I had no
So,
idea.
so what, do you contact Lamborghini? Be like, hey, man, like you guys know who I am, but now I actually want to go pay for all this stuff and buy a car. Buy how does that
Yeah.
work?
So my previous year, 2014, when I was running in the series, I had met Chris Ward at the time, who was the main face of Lamborghini North America motorsports. So I reached out to him and said, "Hey, listen, I got a heck of an opportunity, a big corporate sponsor. How much does this stuff cost?" I have no idea. Never had paid for any of this stuff in my life. So, and he gave me ballpark numbers, and he said, "Here's a couple teams." And the team I drove for previously actually pulled the seat from me because they had another paying customer, and they said, "Sorry, Corey, we're full." So I'm like, "Oh my God, I don't know anybody else." So Chris Ward then is when he and our relationship really started from there. Chris Ward guided me to change racing, which I drove for 5 years after that, but really connected the dots and made my budget work. And it kind of just all organically happened from there. So I got all my budget numbers from Chris, went back to Monster. They immediately approved it. I wasn't making any money by that means, but I was racing, and that's all that mattered to me. And I had a massive corporate a powerhouse of an energy drink company behind me. I
Yeah.
thought this is unbelievable, and it was a multi-year deal. It was
Oh, it was
two 2 years with a third-year option, and I ran it all the way to year three,
that's amazing.
um,
Did
which
you
is
did you tell
wild.
Lamborghini like, hey, it's Monster Energy wants to kind of be affiliated with the series, or how does that work?
Yeah, I will not initially. I kept
Okay.
everything very close. Like I was so terrified that I'd lose them for whatever reason,
I totally get that. Like, totally
and
get
I'm
that.
like,
Yeah.
I got it. I'm protecting this thing as long as I possibly can until the ink is dry on the paper, right? So that my initial conversations with Lamborghini at the time were like, hey, I have a sponsor. I just need to know how much this stuff cost. And then conversations have kind of kept going, and they're like, who is it? Why are you so like, I would call every day to try to figure out what was going on, right? And finally I told them, and they're like, holy shit, like this is massive, man. Like,
Yeah.
how did you
Like
do that?
for Lamborghini, that's massive. I mean,
Right,
when I was at
right.
Ferrari, if Monster Energy approached us and said we want to do a sponsor a car in the series, it's a big deal in the Ferrari Challenge. So for Lamborghini at
It
the
was
time, that's a
massive.
huge deal.
It was massive, and especially at that point in time, like Super Trofeo was just starting. Like they were just getting some traction, and to have that car, their funding and their guidance throughout it all, like it really, that honestly kind of really put me on the map within Lamborghini, and that following year, 2015, with Monster's help and the stealth mobile that we had, we ended up winning the championship. We won the overall championship and a world championship that year. Um, and that's really where the Lamborghini train really started to happen that year. And for almost a decade, I was with the brand.
Wow. That is one of the most insane synthesis of luck and timing and opportunity I've ever heard. I had no
It,
idea that that was your path to getting into Lamborghini. It's amazing. It's like that's an
yeah.
insane story. You win the international Super Trofeo Championship, which is over in Italy.
So that year was actually in Sebring. It was one
Okay.
of the first years we did the world finals at Sebring. But everybody from all around the world came. So we had guys from Europe, guys from Asia, guys stateside. So we combined everybody together and had a world final, and we ended up winning that in 2015.
And do they do every other year? They do the race in Italy, and then every other year they'll do it somewhere in an international circuit.
I think 2015 might have been the only US based world final that we've had in Super Trofeo, I want to
Okay.
say. Everywhere else, it's been in Italy, Spain, Portugal, um, where the overseas guys have a little bit of an advantage because they've obviously raced those tracks throughout the year.
Yeah.
So we didn't have home field advantage like we did at Sebring. So maybe that was also another help that year in 2015. Who knows?
Have you ever had a chance to race overseas?
I have, yeah. I've raced globally all around the world, thankfully, through Lamborghini over the years. Japan, I did the Asian Le Mans, Malaysia, Japan, China, uh, Italy, Spain, you name it.
And when you say thanks to Lamborghini, was that through Lamborghini at that point, or that was through Super
Yeah.
Trofeo, or how it what does that mean?
So, culmination of it over the years, right? So from 2015 to now, basically 2022, I was with Lamborghini, to where I wasn't a factory driver. Now we get into like the driver ratings type of thing, but I wasn't a factory driver. I was more so their undercover guy that was a silver that they could implement in place anywhere that was needed within Lamborghini branded cars. And Chris Ward was a big supporter of mine, and he would basically guide me and say, okay, hey, um, you need to go over here and race here. And you know the cars really well. And at this point, Super Trofeo, I only did 2015 was really my first season of Trofeo. 2016, I jumped straight to GT3 cars and I put all my focus on GT3 stuff. And then as years went on, I went back to Super Trofeo and we ended up winning multiple championships there. Every year that I've ran Trofeo, I've won a championship. And that kind of kept propelling the Lamborghini brand to keep supporting their only American driver that they actually supported.
Yeah,
So from then on out, you look back on what did I write on that napkin at Monticello?
yeah.
I wanted to be a factory driver. Well, that was my ticket of like, okay, maybe Lamborghini is that factory driver option. And for, like I said, almost a decade, I chased that dream and I didn't necessarily get the title, um, but they treated me basically like a factory guy.
Close enough, man. Close enough. And now you get to
Almost.
go drive a brand new American race car at Daytona in a few weeks, right? So
Yeah.
it
It's
everything's close enough.
it all works out, man.
Yeah,
I don't understand at the time you don't understand why or how it's gonna happen or why things happen that they did or didn't happen type of thing.
yeah,
But everything it all happens for a reason and so be it. But my Lamborghini days were awesome, and I wouldn't have had the accomplishments, the results that I have today. The Daytona victory, the Sebring victories, 12-hour victories, and heck, even the overseas accomplishments that I have, running the spa 24 hours and things you look back on and like you count your lucky stars. Never say never.
what was the first time like when you took Eau Rouge in a Lamborghini?
Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Um, I remember talking with the factory guys leading up to it, and I'm like, my goal is to do it flat, no lift, 100% throttle. Because at the time, everybody was doing it, but they're like, be on point. If you miss it, it's usually a big accident at the top of the hill. I was like, oh, okay. And I remember going through. I think I went through twice, and at the time, before they redesigned the bottom of a Rouge, it was so violent that the visor, I usually drove with my visor cracked up just a little bit, the visor would slam down and my head would go down, being so violent and going up the hill. And it kind of caught me off guard. And I wanted to make sure my angles were right going up the hill. And at the third time, I was like, okay, visor's fully up. We're going full up. And I think I know where I'm going to place the car. Third time through, I did it flat. And I just remember being like, this is amazing. Like, pinch me. This is a
Yeah.
childhood dream come true. We've done it. It was gnarly. It was so aggressive. Um, it was so aggressive that like I remember seeing video of the car going up the hill and the car squats so much that actually smoke from the back tire rubbing on the fender liner and the sparks from the ground coming up. It was like,
Wow.
so it's just cool.
Yeah, that's wild.
Spa was, I'll never forget Spa. Spa was, man, that was wild. It monsooned. I remember being in the middle of the night, pouring down rain, can't see a foot in front of me, full throttle down the back straightaway, and then fireworks are going off, and then the fog from the fireworks or the smoke from the fireworks created this dense fog. You couldn't see anything on top of not being able to see with the monsoon.
when
And
when
then I
you're
remember
when you're
getting,
doing when you're doing those late night stints, I mean, I guess you have so much adrenaline at that point that you're not tired. I mean, if you're at Daytona at 2, 3 in the morning, um, running on not a lot of sleep. What's that like? How are you getting through that?
adrenaline, honestly. For me, for the long races, I struggle to sleep. Um, my mind doesn't shut off. I'll lay down and try to relax if I can, but I always have the in-car radio with us so I could hear what's going on with the team. I could hear the spotters constantly telling where the other cars are. Um, but my fear is if I fell asleep and they needed me for whatever reason and no one was there to like quickly come grab me or something, and I miss trying to get in the car or someone got sick or hurt or something of that, like I didn't want to miss anything. So for me, I can never actually truly shut off. And doing those graveyard stints, honestly, they're so peaceful to me. Like it's just you're doing laps and it's almost automatic at that point. As soon as you get in the race car, everything warms up. Usually at Daytona, it's quite cold.
Yeah.
So you're cold before you get in, and then once you strap in, it's like everything goes out the window, and you're just so focused on what's going on and listening. And to me, I found it to be peaceful
Are your
and
lap
somewhat.
times relatively stable throughout the night? Do you find that your lap times get a little bit slower
Um,
than in the daytime, or you're pretty consistent all throughout?
I would say majority of the time you're pretty consistent throughout. Usually at night though, you tend to go a little bit faster, just with cooler air and cooler temps. The cars just perform just a little bit better. So you might gain a few tenths here and there. It's not like, oh, it's a second faster by any means, but you do end up going a little bit quicker. Maybe let's call it the maximum, maybe a half second maximum. Um, just with cooler temps, the cars just like the cooler air.
I want to just get to kind of what I would call the highlight maybe of your career of winning Daytona.
Hmm.
Would you consider that the highlight of your career?
Yeah, I'd
Thus
probably say
thus
that.
far, the highlight thus
So
far.
far,
So far, yeah.
so far, Daytona was a dream come true. That was one of the goals I set out early on also in my career is like, okay, I want to win the big endurance races, because those are the only races I could really do in GT3 land. My last full season in GT3 was 2016. It was my rookie year in GT3. Now going into 2024, I'm back. It took me almost a decade to get back there, but throughout my years, all my races were the endurance races, and I became the endurance guy. The that was really good on the long run, was safe, predictable, didn't wreck anything. Um, so my goal was at the time to win every endurance race that I could, and I got Daytona, I got the Sebring 12 hour. I got podiums at Watkins and Petit so far. I haven't been able to win those just yet, but we finished second a handful of times at each, and help propel the teams to championships and endurance championships. So the role has been fulfilling. But to cap it off for sure, I think Daytona was probably one of the biggest highlights that I've had so far.
You mentioned kind of you're the endurance consistent guy. Is your dad still in the back of your head saying, Corey, don't crash because we can't afford next weekend?
Pretty much, yeah. It's always there, and having that mindset throughout my early days of racing, it really helped me protect everything that I got, right? You're here, make the most of every opportunity and do the best that you can, but don't crash the dang thing. And I think that's one of the life lessons I think I've had throughout my career is what's helped me stay in the game as long as I have. Knock on wood, it's like we haven't crashed. I've had maybe one or two accidents throughout these 15 years, and I count my lucky stars for that because that's not easy to do, to stay out of trouble. So it's you go back to the roots of how everything began and the life lessons that you've got from early stages to now. You still carry on,
Yeah.
but definitely, it's always in the back of my mind of okay, well, don't crash. And thankfully, these days I don't have to worry about crash damage on my own, but you got to finish. So the team owners that are hiring me to drive for their cars and their teams and manufacturers, they expect me to bring the car back in one piece.
Yeah. So you set out for a goal when you were whatever, 8 years old, following Marco Andretti to get into IndyCar. You've achieved a lot in sports cars. Have you ever managed to get behind the wheel of an Indy car?
I have not. I have not. The highest open wheel stuff I did was Indy Lights. I guess probably the closest thing to a Formula car has been prototypes. I've driven a handful of prototypes, whether LMP3 cars, LMP2 cars. I never got the IndyCar dream of doing the Indianapolis 500,
Do you
but
think you'd be competitive in those in that jumping from sports cars into really high level Formula cars?
it might take me a bit. I think if I just hopped in, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Those guys operate on a completely different comfort level than what I'm probably used to. Could I get close? Yeah, probably. I think I could. But to be at the ultimate pace and the trusting of downforce and everything like that, those guys are just next level. And that's why I think, racing against these guys now in sports cars that transition from back and forth, it really is a unique opportunity. And it's really cool to see because I understand what they go through in sports cars and prototypes and whatnot. But to do 240 miles an hour going into Indianapolis turn one or something like that, it's a whole new level of speed and downforce. And I can only imagine the G load that happens within the car and the wear and tear in the body. And they just kind of keep going, like the Scott Dixons of the world, the New Gardens, Rossi, they're all, friends that, we always say hi as we pass and whatnot. But it's like, those guys are good, man. And if I had the same opportunity, maybe I could be with them, but I'd try to stick in my own lane.
I gotcha. And it seems to be going pretty well for you. Well, hey, dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. Super interesting. And looking forward to following you over the next few years.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.